What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success and Out listeners. This is where you come from. What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? I know I sound like a broken record, but folks, follow, subscribe, like this thing up, share it out. It really helps the show. We appreciate it. So who are we talking to today? Well, I am talking to my good friends here from the White Collar Support Group. We're going to talk about some stuff really about what happens when you get out of prison and what's out there that's barriers. And the biggest one is we're going to talk about a federal expungement initiative. And we're also going to talk about our White Collar Support Group and why we do that and why we do the White Collar Conference. So I want to kind of introduce who these guys are that I'm talking to. These are actually good friends of mine. So I'm going to make sure that I get their intro right. So we've got Jeff Grant, who is the co-founder of the White Collar Support Group. Jeff is actually an ordained minister, and he also got reinstated as an attorney. So he's kind of got all the angles there. And he was an attorney in New York, and his career got a little derailed with addiction, and then he got incarcerated. But he turned the experience into a mission of redemption. Today, he leads a national weekly support group for justice-impacted white-collar individuals and runs Grant Law, helping individuals, executives, and families navigate legal and personal challenges. And then we've got our own Drew Chapin, who I don't know what we'd do without Drew, because anything that has anything to do with social, with tech, with anything, with our White Collar Support Group, everything that we've got going on with this White Collar Conference, we just said, can we do that, Drew? Is that okay, Drew? How do we get that out there, Drew? So Drew is the founder of the Discoverability Company. It's a digital he's a digital discovery specialist with a 360-degree background. He's been through it all, and he's got a lot of experience. And in entrepreneurship, he's making speeches to Yale and Berkeley and all these different places. And he's a young guy with the type of experience where he goes and he talks and people want to listen to what he has to say because he's a smart guy. And he kind of tells them how to avoid the steps that he went into as an entrepreneur. But he helps businesses be front and center online, optimizing the search and social and AI platforms. He's just a guy, if you need help online, go search out Drew Chapin. So I can't wait to jump into all this. Before we do, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. Negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financings, full service. Go to Auto Plaza Direct to get started with your personal car concierge. It's a car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. And folks, check out this book. He was a guest on the show, an incredible story. The book is called Doctor Not Guilty by exonerated psychiatrist and internist Muhammad Ali Rafai. It's a battle cry and blueprint for anyone misjudged by a system that should protect the innocent. The book takes you inside the investigation, the courtroom, and hard nights when faith and courage remain. You will meet the prosecutors and agents who failed and the physicians and families and patients who refused to surrender. This book reveals the truth about how power can distort justice and how resilience can truly set you free. Read it, share it, join Dr. Rafai demanding accountability and restoring honor and dignity to medicine and the rule of law. All right, Jeff Grant, Drew Chapin, here we are.
You're so good at that, Brent. It's unbelievable. And I just want to point out that Drew gets invited to speak at like Yale and Berkeley.
Yeah.
And I get invited to speak at like Walgreens and Kroger's. So it's just,
Everybody's got to know their platform.
Something's wrong with this.
So guys, everything we're talking about right now, it's kind of hot in the world of talking about justice reform. It's we were on Jeff the other day talking on another podcast with Sabrina Morgan about in my lifetime, I'm 58 years old. I think there's more being talked about with justice reform and a light on it more than there has been. And why do you guys think that is?
Well, I think at least for white collar, I can't speak for the entire criminal justice reform movement because, in many ways that movement has stalled, mostly because of lack of funding and lack of focus. And if you want more about that, read almost anything that Glenn Martin puts up online. He's very articulate on the subject. But there's no question in my mind that this is kind of the sweet spot for white collar right now. We really haven't had a voice or seat at the table in terms of generalized criminal justice and for people to understand what we've gone through, to develop any empathy or compassion for us. They painted us with a very broad brush. But now we're in a climate where I think almost anybody, certainly anybody listening to this podcast, knows somebody who has undergone some kind of white collar prosecution or is maybe, one degree of separation from. And like, okay, we can talk about this now. I got to talk about this with my kids. I got to talk about this with my friends. It's not okay to stick my head in the sand and just pretend it doesn't happen or somehow to dismiss people because of something they did wrong, and then a kind of a cancel culture effect of where all of a sudden I can't accept them as being human anymore. So I think we are in that age of enlightenment. I think part of it has to do with the current administration, but this has been going on for 10 years now, of where white collar is a national topic. And I think that we are taking the right approach by talking about it in a spiritual realm first. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of practical implications and things that people have to get through. But the three of us, the reason why we come every week to the White Collar Support Group, I think is because we understand that if we dedicate our lives to service and to helping others, then the benefits of that not only accrue to them, but to the culture in general and to ourselves. And so, I mean, that's why I'm proud to be on this podcast with the two of you, for sure.
Well, I mean, I think you bring up a good point because we all met each other through finding the white collar support group, Jeff, that you created with your wife Lynn. But one of the big three, there's three pillars: housing, jobs, and the third one is community. And community is such an important thing because, strangely enough, when you're in prison, that is your community, and they've hit their rock bottom in that moment of time. But when you get pushed back out, you've got to figure out how to live in a society where you've got something that's tattooed on your forehead and it's not going away. And one of the things that we all have talked about is, why is it that, and you do a quick search on Chat GPT, uh, all 50 states except Alaska have some form of expungement. There is no federal statute for expungement as a federal ex-felon. And that's one of the things that we got talking about as a group is, why is that? Why should somebody who's been federally convicted be different than somebody who's in the state of Missouri or the state of Florida or wherever? And I think that's really it's a state of fairness, really. It's what does it mean? Because as we all know, the presidential pardon is the only path really to some form of what you can seek in that realm. and that's tough. It's a tough road to hoe. And, Drew, when you go and you speak, like you just recently went to Yale, you walk into a room as a federal ex-felon. And I think one of the things that's interesting about all of that happens when you go into I've been lucky enough to do that too with a college group, is they look at you kind of funny when you walk in. But I think once they relate to you and you share with them and you do can you share with us how that all works for you when you go in and make those steps to introduce yourself to someone and you're the ex-felon talking?
Well, yeah, and not to pick on something that you just said, but you said when I walk into the room, I'm a guy who walks in as a federal ex-felon. I think that's the point about this federal expungement thing is I'm not an ex-felon. I'm a felon, you know.
Mhm.
Um, that status remains, and even if I were to be somebody who received a presidential pardon, I would still have that record and I would still have that felon label. And so I think that that's, not to I will answer your question, not to go too far off on a detour, but that's kind of the point of this federal expungement thing is that there's no off ramp. There's no way to say like, okay, I walked in, I did what I was supposed to do. I paid the price for the mistakes or the poor choices that I made. And now that's behind me. It just isn't. And so I just wanted to underscore that. I think it's a nice way to connect those two dots there. But yeah, when I walk into these classrooms, really my mission is to help people understand how somebody can go into a situation. Like in my story, where I was a startup founder who started a company with every good intention and had no plans to go astray or to make any kind of the poor choices that I did. Try to show them like, look, you can go into these things and not be a bad guy or have any sort of ill intent. Um, Make poor choices as a result of things like immense pressure that startup founders feel, mental health, all these different things that you can set up on an individual, an organizational, or systemic level, and end up where nobody wants to be in federal prison, and with that lifelong label of being a felon. And so it's part cautionary tale, but I think more than anything, um, what I do is I go in there and I talk about how people can be objective and be honest with themselves and look at the situations that they're in and try to avoid making these seemingly unimportant decisions that end up being the whole thing. Um, Fortunately, both in that classroom when I'm speaking with students, and also in my career when now I'm running my own firm, but before when I was like applying for jobs and talking to startup founders and trying to get back to the work that I do, people look at it and they hear the story and they go, yeah, obviously what he did was not correct. Those are definitely poor choices. But I understand how he got there. And I understand how a lot of people that are maybe in this room or maybe people who I interacted with, earlier this week or whatever, are doing something similar. And that's a really, really big, kind of switch that I like to make sure that I flip and have people really open up their eyes to how much of this is going around. And I will say, I think that is part of what has kind of shifted this conversation in a more macro, zeitgeist kind of way. Because not only are more people touching the criminal justice system, either directly or through a family member or a friend, or they're reading stories, or they're hearing about it on TikTok with people like, Sabrina Morgan or any of these other influencers who are out there just like sharing their stories they weren't doing 10 years ago. And it's all good. Like it's all just kind of this rising tide of awareness.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. What you just said there, the social media, people can say there's a lot of bad things about social media, but one of the things I think is social media has allowed people to, uh, especially with the reentry community, criminal justice reform, sharing stories, because stories are really what connect so many people
Mm.
because they can relate. They turn the movie on in their brain. And I think, you look at Portia Lauder, you look at Sabrina Morgan, all these different people who've been successful on that platform as people are connecting with them by them sharing what experience they've shared or they've experienced, and those people connect themselves into that world and relate. And you can never get anything done unless somebody can relate to you, and I think that's uh, a huge part of that. The bigger part of what we're doing is a lot of people, when we said we wanted to go after a federal expungement initiative statute, they said, "Well, that can't be done. That can't be done." And I think it's for us, and I'm speaking as just a mindset. I kind of think we're the perfect people to do that because when you get out of prison, everything is you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. And so we're used to walking and pushing through barriers just to try to be able to be around. And I think that the other thing that you have to do when you get out of prison, you have to do a lot of connecting dots, to be able to get to where you want. And that's a lot of what this is with this um, federal expungement initiative is who can we connect dots with that have influence that believe and relate to what we're trying to get done.
Yeah, you're definitely right, Brent. There's no question that visibility and just showing up over a course of years has created access. So when I was I was an attendee at a webinar. I mean, this is how the Federal Expungement Initiative got off the ground. I was an attendee at a webinar, and it was moderated by Doug Berman at Ohio State Law. And one of the panelists was Rachel Barco at NYU Law. And, Rachel was formerly on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and she was Justice Scalia's law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court. A big name, someone who understands sentencing and understands, certainly has a huge heart. And one sentence just came out of her mouth while they were talking about pardons and talking about kind of what's going on in the world of this administration and former administration. And the sentence that came out of her mouth was, there's nothing preventing Congress from passing a federal expungement law. And I stopped dead in my tracks. Did I hear what I just heard? Yeah, I couldn't rewind it. And but I did call her up the next day, and I said, "Is that true?" And she said, "Oh yeah, it's true, but no one's ever gotten this off the ground. I mean, there have been some minor attempts, but there's it might be a good time for it to happen. I mean, there's certainly bipartisan wind at our sails in terms of criminal justice reform. And with all these pardons that are going on, maybe there's room for something that's a longer term solution, like an expungement law." And we got to talking about it a little bit. And I said, well, I think our white collar support group might want to get behind this and push this. And if we do, will you be, a co-founder? And she said, well, if you get Mark Osler and Doug Berman on board, I'll do it. So we called up Mark and we called up Doug, and both of them were very enthusiastic. And mostly because it's a natural place for the conversation to go right now. It's like, what are we going to do to balance what's going on in terms of the federal view towards crime, and especially if the Trump administration now is talking about a crime bill. And if we're going to get tough on crime again, if that's what's going to be happening, well, why not balance it with an off-ramp? I mean, certainly we all know that the logical thing and it happens in a lot of these states and happens in other countries, is you enter the system, there's got to be a way to exit the system. But in the federal in federal criminal justice, there is currently no way to exit the system. So we start to rally people, including the two of you and a bunch of other people who are policymakers and lawyers and academics. And we put together this team, and we are moving forward. And also, huge thanks to the pro bono department at Paul Weiss, who's given us time and done research for us. And I think we're in a place right now where we are in the next few months. I don't know if a few is 3 or I don't know if few is 9 months, but a few months, we will be talking to senators, probably on the Judiciary Committee, about sponsoring a bill, and then what would go into that bill. I mean, what does it really look like? And that's it's not easy in terms of figuring out not only what's the right thing to do, but then politically and diplomatically what we need to accomplish in order to for the goal to wind up something like where we hoped it would go.
Jeff, I was thinking while you were talking, you had a big thing happen when you got out of prison that you worked really hard at, and you got reinstated as an attorney,
Mhm.
your law license. And I wonder, because you and I talked a little bit about this
Mhm.
recently, but that is a sense of redemption, expungement, because you have to go through a process where they basically certify you again that you
Yes.
are a you're good enough to be a reinstated uh, person and have your law license back. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're talking about here. And I also think that's probably what gave you even more confidence to think this is something that feeling that gave you. How can we bridge that into a bigger purpose for people? But you would think, and this is what there's a lot of talk all the way around, but most people who serve time, the reason why this is such a heavy feeling is that you feel like when you serve time that you almost should get a certificate that says, "I'm done. Here you go. Thanks for serving your time.
Mhm.
Now go out and do good and be good and get your second opportunity working." And that's not at all what happens.
No, and
It's where it really starts. You think, "Oh my gosh, the worst thing that's going to happen to me is I'm going to lose everything and then I'm going to go to prison. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare." And then the thing that you think least about is reentry. And that's the thing that stays with you the longest. And that's the thing that you have to work through. And one of the things that really enthuses me about this federal expungement initiative that we're working on is we're not trying to recreate the wheel and reinvent something.
yeah,
There's some really good things out there from states that all it needs to do is be recrafted a little bit for the federal level. And you can just take bits and pieces from different states and have a really good new statute. And that's what I'm encouraged about is we're not starting from scratch. There's a lot out there.
yeah. I'm just before we get Drew's take on it, I just want to be really clear about something. Although we've decided to take the lead advocacy on this, as a white collar support group and as people who've been prosecuted or convicted of white collar crimes, we're doing this for the benefit of everybody. I mean, it just happens to be a point in time where we think that we can be a voice for this, but we're not doing it just for ourselves. We're doing it for anybody and everybody who has been convicted of a federal crime. Now, certainly, there are some crimes when this all kind of gets worked out between our committee and then talking to the Congress. As it gets worked out, some crimes, people who've committed some crimes will never be able to get an expungement. And then the length of time, for example, that it will take to get an expungement, it's going to take years, probably. I mean, probably, I don't know. I'm guessing. I'm shooting from the hip here, but it could be 7 years post-release before you even qualify for an expungement. So this is like a long-term project, and very different than the climate of pardons right now. And I think that that's what makes it possible, because we're really looking at people's redemption stories. Like, for example, if you have to have a job for 7 years, then someone has to give you a job. If you have to do volunteer work for 7 years, then someone has to allow you to volunteer. I mean, it makes the entire community somewhat responsible. And that culture change happens slowly and it happens over time. And I know from other projects I've worked on with other nonprofits and things that if that culture change is possible, it will happen somewhere in the future where it will become like a regular part of the way that things are handled, and it'll be long after the three of us are forgotten.
Yeah. Drew, I think you've been out, um, you've been home. How long has it been now?
About 2.5 years.
2.5 years. And I've been able to watch from the moment that you got out to where you are now. And I would say, looking from watching, I'm not in the middle of it with you, but you have been a successful reentry person. And I know it hasn't been easy. How do you like when you go into the situations that you've gone into, how do you work around this thing that hangs around your neck?
Yeah, I don't know that you work around anything. I mean, you really sort of like work with it. And I mean that in pretty much every way that you can that you could mean that. I mean, professionally, this is an experience that I really, when I'm speaking to potential employers or people that I'm going to work with or whatever, I talk about this as um, you know, kind of like my earned secret or like what makes me different or what, something I try and demonstrate like, hey, look, this is an experience that I had and I learned a lot from it. Here's A, B, and C. And that makes me different than that candidate or that other person you're thinking about working for. And it's a strength. And so that's a big part of it. It's certainly true, in personal situations, and in relationships with like friends and family members and all that kind of thing. And a lot of that really comes from community. I know we haven't talked about it yet, but the White Collar Conference that's coming up here in October, I'll be moderating a panel called Restoration Through Community. And I really think that's the story, like I wouldn't have the language, I wouldn't have these tools in my toolkit to have gotten back to my career and to talk about it as a strength and to do those things unless this community existed and we're able to engage every week and more. But I really think that so much of that is finding strength in community.
Yeah, I do too.
Drew, what I think is remarkable about your story or your redemption story, your post prison story, is that this was a conscious choice that you made that you were gonna lean into it. I mean, we know a lot of people, and there's a lot of people in the white collar support group who make another choice, and they don't put their
And there's nothing wrong with that. By the
Mhm.
way, that's a that's
no
totally like a personal style decision. Yeah.
no judgment. But how do you think that it's affected your ability to become an active part of the business world again, having made that choice?
Well, I think I disarm it in a way by owning it. A lot of people live in fear of, oh man, I made these poor choices in the past. I went to prison or not, or whatever. I went through the criminal justice system, whatever that means for that person. And I don't want people to find out. And then it becomes this thing that's just kind of like locked up and makes them nervous and goes, oh man, like what happens if somebody finds out? How am I going to explain this? How am I going to do that? And so my thought process on that has simply been to just open it up and then I have nothing to worry about.
Mhm.
And frankly, that was a lesson of like all the things that I did wrong before when running my startup is when the company wasn't achieving the kind of success that we were hoping for. I was so nervous. I was kind of like, oh man, I need to guard this. I can't tell the investors. They're going to be so mad, all that kind of thing. How much easier my journey would have been. And I probably would have avoided this catastrophic outcome if I were just open and I had just been objective and honest with myself and honest with the people around me. And I find that freeing. I find a lot of freedom in my personal and professional life now afterwards, just totally disarming it by acknowledging it, pointing to it and saying like, yeah, this is here in the room with us.
Yeah, and I think, and I feel that same way, Drew, is that somebody said to me, um, if you don't own your story, somebody else will.
Mm.
Right.
And it's after we go through everything that we go through, at least you can own your story. At least own your story. Know how to
Yeah.
tell your story, what you went through and what it means. And I think, Drew, you just said really brought that up in a strong way, is that it can be almost a superpower of yours when you go in and you tell them because of the way I experienced this is why I'm different and what that means to your organization. But taking all that about what it would mean if you could walk in and you were someone who had been totally expunged and now you're in a different realm. I don't even know what that would feel like.
Well, you did bring it up, at least for me, a little bit there, Brent, because when I got my law license reinstated, that was like a hand being passed over me
Mhm.
that this guy's okay, right? And and that's affected me in so many ways, not just with my self-esteem. That's certainly true with my self-esteem and the fear that I walk through life with. But I think that my daughters are proud for me to be their father again. And, there's a big difference, I mean, I have grandchildren at this point, but for my daughters to be able to say, that, the difference between this is my father, he went to prison, or this is my father, the lawyer, that's a big difference. And it made me take a step back and really realize how much I hurt my family and I hurt the people around me and what they must have been living with through all of these years. And and not just because of the tag of felon that's been put on us, but the double life, the lying, the looking over my shoulder, being so obsessed with my problems that I wasn't able to be present there for my family. And now everything has changed. But I mean, let's face it, very few people get their law licenses reinstated. What we're talking about is a project that has a specific task to grant expungements to a lot of people over time. And the reason for that is because why not? I mean, why shouldn't our criminal justice system look different than the way that we've known it? Why can't there be an exit? And just because this is the way it's always been, or is not a good answer, right? All right. So you enter, you pay your dues, you do what you got to do, and if you get everything right, then you have a good shot of exiting.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point too on a sense of pride. You go through this, and there is an exit, and you can pridefully say that you've exited that and you've moved on. There is no exit right now; it just
Mm.
goes on, and it's it all also falls. You got recidivism, you got all these, but it does give an incentive out there for a person who is in the federal system that went through the prison system of the federal government. There would be a built-in incentive if you know that so many months, years, whatever, and you're expunged. Uh, I would think that would also fall into a helpful thing with recidivism. Hopefully, you never know.
So, not to take over the hosting job here, but I feel like we've talked a little bit about the white collar support group, but I don't think that for anyone who's logged on here, kind of knows what we're talking about. We do meet once a week on Monday nights from 7 to 8:15 p.m. on Zoom. And at this point, we've had 1,600 members come through. On a typical Monday night, there's probably about 40 people online. And to me, my favorite thing is when someone comes on for the first time and they're scared, and we've heard from them during the week, or they've reached out during the week and we've gotten them the log on information. And then all of a sudden their face pops up on the screen and they're freaking out. Like, they can't believe that, oh my God, like, I've been going through this alone for sometimes years. and there's like 40 people here who are going to give of themselves freely and share and provide me resources. And the answer is, yeah, that's right. And for the life of me, I don't know how we can be, um, how people don't know about us. I don't know that, because basically if you put in ChatGPT or you put in Google white collar support group, our name pops up.
Yeah.
So you can't be doing a very exhaustive search if you haven't found us. But I appreciate that people are scared and they're afraid they're looking for the needle in the haystack. And I can tell you that there are a lot of things that people will do in order to gain some form of advantage in their criminal justice journey. They'll hire people, they'll spend a lot of money, they'll do all kinds of things. They don't want to leave that stone unturned. We don't charge anything. We're all volunteer. We're doing this out because we're doing this out of love and healing and self-healing. And it's the greatest thing I've ever experienced in my life. By far, the greatest, most fulfilling thing I've ever had.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, and it gets, there's a lot of people that get really something from it. And it's very impactful, which I think is a good transition to talk about the White Collar Conference, because we had our White Collar Conference last year. And Jeff, you want to talk about what we've got as a lineup of coming October 11th?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I have to, I have to, I have the flu people out there. I have the flu people out there. I usually have like better lighting. So, you see, we
No,
all
sure,
know
it's the lighting. Yeah. No, yeah.
It's for sure the lighting, right? Not what I said when we first got on.
We all know each other really well. And the fact that we're playing this so straight is like blowing my mind.
Before we got on, I told Jeff he just looked like hell, and his face really went sad. And I said, "I'm just kidding. You look fine."
Me vain? What are you talking about? That's I put on my dark blue jacket to lose 10 pounds, right?
That looks
So
nice.
so our conference last year went great. No doubt about it. It was our first time, and we didn't know how it was going to be received. And it was mostly our members telling stories, and we did the best we could. But it was it was universally received well, and it gave us some impetus to reach out more and to try to find topics and to try to find speakers who would be impactful, but also who we could connect with on a very different level. So our first speaker, our first keynote, is Jeffrey Toobin, who's a CNN commentator and author of the book, The Pardon, about the Nixon administration pardon. And it's very topical right now in terms of what we're going through in our criminal justice system. And Jeff is a pro. And just to have, gotten his attention and his approval is an amazing get for us, and I don't know that he's actually going to talk about us on CNN, but I'd like him to. But there's no question that having Jeffrey as a keynote, is a big win for us. And then I've been to 2 criminal justice conferences recently. One put on by the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the other by the American Bar Association. And people came up to me at these conferences and said, "How did you get Sam Bankman-Fried's father to be a speaker at your conference?" And I said, "Well, we asked him, right? It wasn't that hard, given the fact that he is genuinely one of the nicest, most earnest people of heart that I've ever met." And so Brent and I got on a Zoom call with him, and he's agreed to be interviewed by Brent in about a 40-minute conversation. And And then that's going to be augmented by a full episode of Nightmare Success that will be in the can at the time of the conference, probably be released a day or two after. And I've talked at length with Joe Bankman about Sam, about the effect on his family, about what it means to be a family that goes through such a high profile prosecution. And he has some very interesting thoughts and reflections that he's willing to share with us that I think anybody who's going through it will be able to relate to. And then I'll just mention third, then we have a panel of people from our federal expungement initiative. We do have Mark Osler and Doug Berman and Todd Hoff from Indiana University, Kelley School of Business. And they're going to be talking about the guts of pardons and expungement and what it really means. And again, I've been to two attorney criminal justice conferences recently, and I can tell you that they are not covering pardons well. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows the history. They're covering it because they think they have to, but there's no real good information that's being passed around there. And what we're hoping is that people who've dedicated their lives to the academics and the understanding of how all these pieces go together, they're going to be able to share with us some important information that's going to help us all make good decisions about pardons and expungement laws and things like that.
And I think just with that lineup, anybody's invited. And the reason why with Joe Bankman, I think it's such an important thing to have him is that we always say when someone gets indicted and convicted, it's not just them, it's their family that has to, family goes to prison too. They just have to live it on the outside.
Yeah.
And so that's just an encouragement for people who have been affected, who are listening, who've been affected on the out. Because I think there's 80 to 85 million people that are affected with some kind of record. So that means there's a lot of people family wise that have to deal with this and what it means to you and how you get through life and how you survive. So tune in. If you've been a part of that, I think these people you can get something from. And it's go ahead, Drew.
Drew,
Joe.
Yeah, Drew. What are you finding different about this year's conference than the focus we had last year? I mean, we've been talking about this. We've been talking about it for 6 months now, and all of a sudden it's here in 3 weeks. And what do you find most interesting about what we're offering and trying to reach out to the community about?
Yeah, and I've said this, I know I've said this to you directly, but I feel like last year we were trying to figure out how to run a conference first and foremost. Like, can we do this? And we were building it really for the people that are in our community of 15 or 1,600 people, and we were trying to re-engage with some folks who maybe haven't shown up to a Monday night in a little while, but we're trying to just use this as a touch point for the community. This year is very different in a way that I think is really constructive and is going to help us get to these goals that we're talking about. In that we're engaging, of course, with all of the members of our community. We're tying everybody in, and everybody has something that everybody in our community has something that they can touch as part of this. But it's far more like external. Like, we're really bringing in a lot of folks and a lot of stories and a lot of people who are not just directly criminal justice system impacted, are really kind of casting a wider net. And I started this by talking about awareness and about how, we were talking about how these topics are kind of in the zeitgeist more and more. And I think that what we're doing here is really moving the ball forward in terms of that awareness. I mean, it's with everything. It's with our federal expungement initiative, where we're out there educating a lot of people in our group, lawyers, legislators, even on simple things like the fact that there is a difference between a pardon and an expungement, and this is what it is. A lot of people just don't know. A lot of people use those terms like interchangeably. Or, having people go through the thought exercise of thinking about what happens after sentencing. Everybody goes, oh, so-and-so got in trouble. How much time are they going to get? Wow, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And then they kind of like move on. And they don't think about the part afterwards. So that awareness is really important. And in my panel that I'll be moderating, Restoration Through Community, I mean, not to get on the soapbox too much, but a lot of people, big picture, everywhere, are struggling because they're not engaging in their communities. They're not out there talking to people. They're not out there connecting. It's contributing to some of the worst things that are happening today. And so what better to do than show folks, look, internal, external, lawyers, legislators, everything, like, look, this is the power of community. Here are some real stories from some real people. And in many cases, this community and communities like it have really saved lives. And so it's incredible stuff. And that's why this is so important. And really, like, the difference between last year and this year. I mean, last year we were getting together, we had really meaningful conversations and stuff, but it was for us. Now it's, okay, like, we're going out there, we're talking to more people, we're bringing them in, and really moving the ball forward in important ways.
That's good, Drew.
Yeah, Brent,
Thanks.
we should record that.
We are recording it. Good for us.
Brent.
Sorry, I blacked out. What happened?
Brent. I think Drew made a great point that kind of leaps over, because when we do wind up testifying before the Judiciary Committee, we put our bill in, and then we have to go to Washington. Together with the actual plan, they want to hear stories. They want people. I mean, we have poster people that where not only are they going to make the kind of impression that we want to make in order to move the bill forward, but the primary thing that they have to explain is how an expungement would actually change their lives. How would it change the trajectory of their lives? And right now, we use the case of Babs Rawls-Ivy, who's a very, very dear friend of mine. And she went to prison for 30 days about 18 years ago. And she's been handcuffed ever since then. And she worked her way back, and she worked her way through the inner city in New Haven, Connecticut. And she's become a very well-known person in terms of community service and being on boards and things in New Haven. And she worked her way back now, and she's a law student. And it's incredible. My friend Babs is in law school right now. It's blowing my mind. But she can graduate law school and have absolutely no confidence whatsoever that she's going to be able to be a lawyer, that the Bar Association is going to accept her, or that she's going to be able to get a job. But with an expungement, all of those things become easier to the X power. I don't know what it is. And I would love for her to not have to run that gauntlet of doubt and shame and people looking at her, through kind of eyes like why are you really doing this? Like, what's your motive? And I can speak for Bab. She wants to be a defense attorney. I mean, she wants to be work for the state. She wants to help indigent people who can't afford attorneys. So she wants to be a public defender, and she's in her 60s already. I mean, this is how she wants to spend the rest of her life. But she's going to now devote 3 years of her life to go to law school with no guarantee whatsoever that on the other side of that, she's going to be able to do what someone who did not have a felony would be able to do. Now, she's a perfect person to put before Congress and be able to say, this is somebody who her and her family's life and the life of a community can change if there is a federal expungement law.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage. You know,
Yeah.
that's one of the things I really love about having this show is I feel lucky enough to sit down in this chair and listen to people
Mm.
who have to try to overcome their situation of reentry, and I try to focus this show on people who actually do that courageously step forward and make the most of their reentry. But when I say that, there's so many good stories over the last 4 seasons, but each and every one of them has the struggle of being legally discriminated against.
Yeah.
I want to say that again. They're legally discriminated against. And what we're trying to talk about here is to take away that so that when someone goes through this, when someone does the things that they need to do and have the courage to step into their new opportunity, that they can truly step into their new opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. Guys, what else? Are we missing anything? Jeff, I think you've done a great job hosting the show, though.
Well, thank you, Brent. You know, now that Jimmy Kimmel,
The audition tape, huh?
Yeah, I suppose we should give dates and times and everything, right?
Yes.
So, if you want more information about the Federal Expungement Initiative, it's federalexpungement.org. And Drew has put together a beautiful, beautiful website there with a lot of information and the faces and the bios of all of our supporters there, or at least some of our supporters. And information about the conference is at whitecollarconference.com, right? That's not a hard one to remember, whitecollarconference.com. And it's going to be the morning of Saturday, October 11th at 9 a.m. Eastern. So you people on the West Coast, sorry, it's going to be at 6 a.m. But it's going to be 3 hours, and it's going to be packed with a lot of information and a gathering of the tribe. By the way, if you tune in early, we did this last year. I hope we're going to do it again this year. We opened up the room a half hour early, and just for people who hadn't seen each other in years and things, everybody just kind of networked, and it was fun for that to happen. I hope we do that this year. And I will be speaking on October 9th, 2 days before the conference, at Bethesda by the Sea Church in Palm Beach. So I know that's a little erudite on Palm Beach, but we definitely want to, bring the message out there. And Drew, where are you going to be speaking over the next couple of weeks?
The first week of October, I will be at Berkeley, and then the conference, and then there's a little break. So stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned. All right, guys, have we done it?
I think we have.
Okay. All right. I want to give a shout out to Homestead Financial. Lets me use this podcast room. I really appreciate it. If you get home mortgage needs, go to Greg Afteev. He knows all that stuff. Want to know anything more about what I'm doing, go to BrentCassity.com. And I spell it wrong. I spell it with a TY, not a DY. I used to say to my people when I was writing my emails back from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Nightmare success, in and out.